Hi. Do you like bananas? I do. They are a wonderful gift from God. They're delicious. Well, in our Bible lesson today, we're not going to talk about bananas, but we're going to talk about faith. In the Bible, faith means believing in something even though you can't see it. Well, what does faith have to do with my banana? What if I tell you that this banana has slices? It's already sliced. You think, well, look, it hasn't even been peeled. How could it be sliced? Do you believe me? If you know me, then you know that I'm going to tell the truth. I'm not going to lie to you. So if you believe that this banana is sliced, then you have faith. You believe something you can't see. Well, let's peel it. First time it's been peeled. Let's open it up and let's see what we find in our banana. Whoa. Check it out, you guys. Look. The banana does have slices already. Look at that. It's sliced already. So did you believe me? Did you have faith that the banana had been sliced, even though you couldn't see the slices? That's faith. Well, in the Bible, there's a man of great faith, and his name is Abram. You might know him as Abraham, and God does change his name later to Abraham, but we're going to call him Abram by his original name right now. Abram's story is found in the book of Genesis, first book of the Bible, Genesis chapter 12. So get your Bible, follow along with me, and we're going to read the first 3 verses of Genesis chapter 12. And you can use your finger to highlight as we read. Okay? Genesis chapter what? Chapter 12. Remember that. It's a very important chapter for you to learn and remember. Genesis chapter 12 is about Abram and God's promises to him. Let's read. The Lord had said to Abram, "Go from your country," this is verse 1, "your people and your father's household to the land that I will show you." What? God says, leave your homeland? Leave your country and go someplace? Wow. Didn't even tell him where. He just said, I'll show you. So then in verse 2, I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great. And he does say more about how he's going to protect them. So number 1, I'm going to give you a land. Number 2, I'm going to make your family a great nation. Well, there's a third promise too, and that's found in the last line of verse 3. Let's just read that part. And in you, all the families of the earth shall be blessed. So God gives Abram 3 promises. Number 1, I'm going to give you a land. Number 2, I'm going to make your family a great nation. And number 3, through your family, all the nations of the whole world will be blessed. Wow. Those are 3 amazing promises. So, did Abram believe in God? Did he do it? Well, let's look in verse 4. So Abram went as the Lord had told him, and Lot with him. Abram was 75 years old when he set out from Haran. He took his wife Sarai, his nephew Lot, and all of his possessions. Abram, Sarai, and Lot, they obeyed. They left their home and they went wherever God would show them. Well, this passage says that they left from Haran, and they did. But earlier, God had told them to leave their original home, which was Ur. And it's sometimes called Ur, U-R, Ur of the Chaldees. It was a very ancient city. But what was that home like? I mean, was it any big deal to leave it? So what? What was it like? Actually, was a very fancy city. Very well organized, very big and prosperous. And archaeologists have found remains of We know a lot about It was a very well organized city. There were lots of houses. There were lots of streets. There were big streets. There were smaller streets. There was water storage. They had systems for bringing in water and storing it so that all the people could use the water in that city. We even know that they had schools. Abram would have grown up going to school. It was a very organized and powerful city. And notice what's in the middle. It had a big temple, a big ziggurat. The people in even Terah, Abram's father, worshipped gods, especially the god called Nana or Nanar sometimes he's called. And here is a statue that they have found, a carving that they have found to the god Nana. Here he is, and notice he has a crescent moon on top, and here's another crescent moon, more crescent moons in this carving. He was considered the god of the moon, and people in this city of worshipped him. Well, God talks to Abram and says, I want you to leave. I want you to leave that. So Abram did. Maybe God thought, I want you to get away from this place where people worship other gods. I don't know, the Bible doesn't really say, but that would be understandable, wouldn't it? That God would want to have a relationship with Abram, so he wants him away from these people that worship other gods. So they obeyed. They took off. They traveled from and here's a map. I hope you can see it. And I guess the words will be backwards, but hope you can see it. Here's and he actually travels up here to Haran and obeys God, even though he didn't know where he was going. I will tell you, this map is backwards because he actually traveled this way. But you get the idea. He left he and his family left went up, and they lived in the land of Haran for a while. So they leave these fancy houses, this fancy city, and they live in tents. They pack up everything, all their animals, all their belongings. They live in tents. And they go to live in a land called Haran for a while. Now, Haran was also a very important ancient city. It was on the trade routes. In other words, merchants, people who sold things and bought things, they would travel along that route. And so while Abram lived in Haran, he became very rich. He must have made a lot of business deals, because then when God tells him to leave that land at the age of 75, this old guy, his old wife, his nephew, they take everything with them. They pack up all their animals, they pack up all their belongings, and they're going to live in tents now. They're going to wander around wherever God tells them. Did you notice that God didn't tell him where he was going? Abram couldn't Google it and find out where they were or where they were going. He couldn't even unroll or unfold an old map and find out where they were going. Do you think it takes faith to do that? To just pack up everything and leave and trust that God's going to tell you where to go and that he's going to take care of you all along the way? Wow, I think that took a lot of faith. Now, I love to camp. I love camping in tents. Do you like it? Have you ever camped before? But how would you like it if you lived in a tent all the time? If you didn't have all of the luxuries of living in a city or living in a house, and you always lived in tents, and you always just moved wherever God told you to go. Now that does take a lot of faith. So even though he didn't know where he was going, Abram believed God and he obeyed and did exactly what God wanted him to do. Well, when they did get to the land of Canaan, which is here, when they got there, God told them, I want you to look around. Look at everything you see. Because he says, I'm going to give you this land. Chapter 12, verse 7. The Lord appeared to Abram and said, to your offspring, I will give this land. Wow. And Abram believed it. He believed it so much that when they would travel along, they would stop at different places like Shechem and like Bethel. And when they did, Abram would build an altar and he would worship God there. Why? Because he had faith in God, a God he couldn't see. It wasn't a statue. He had faith that God would take him to this beautiful land, and he did. And then he had faith that God said, it's going to belong to your family. Abram believed it, even though he couldn't see it. Now remember that God had said, I'm going to give you a great nation. I'm going to give your family a great nation. There are going to be a lot of them. Well, he took him outside and he told them, I want you to look up at the stars. And I don't have that verse right in front of me, but it's there in chapter 12. And he says, I want you to look up at the stars. And I want you to see how many stars there are. Well, that's how many children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren that I'm going to give you. I love this picture. It's Abram looking up and seeing just millions of stars in the sky. Now, we live in Southern California. We live where there are a lot of towns and cities, so there are a lot of lights at night. So our sky doesn't get super dark, and so we can't see a lot of stars like this usually. But maybe you've been camping out someplace where you did see stars that look like that. Could you even begin to count them? No. But Abram knew that God put those stars up there. So Abram knew God had the power to do what he was saying. And he would make his family great. He would give them as many kids and grandkids and great-grandkids as there were stars up in outer space. There's another passage, and that's in Genesis 22:17, where God says that your family will be as many as the sands on the seashore. Well, you've been to the beach, and you know there's a lot of sand. What if you took just a handful of that sand? How many grains of sand do you think are in your hand? You couldn't even count them. Well, that's how many children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren Abraham is going to have, or Abram. And you know what? Abram believed him. He believed God with all his heart, and he worshiped this great and powerful God. You know, we've never seen God, but just like Abram, we can have faith in the God that we can't see. We can trust that his promises will come true. God bless you, and trust in him with all your heart. Love you.